In the early 1900s, aviation was still in its infancy worldwide, and only a handful of people had ever seen an airplane in flight. South Africa was geographically distant from the European centers of aviation, yet the fascination with flight had already reached the country. Percy Paterson, a pioneer aviator and engineer, was one of the earliest visionaries in South Africa who believed that the new invention of the airplane could change the future of transportation and technology. Percy Paterson was inspired by the achievements of the Wright brothers and European aviation pioneers such as Louis Blériot, who had crossed the English Channel in 1909. South Africa at the time had limited industrial infrastructure, so building an airplane locally was a huge challenge, requiring innovation, hand-built components, and improvisation. Paterson, along with John Weston and a few other aviation enthusiasts, set out to construct a biplane capable of flight. The Paterson No. 2 biplane was the result of their determination, designed and built between 1911 and 1912. This aircraft represented one of the very first steps South Africa took toward establishing its own aviation history and community. The Paterson No. 2 biplane was a two-winged aircraft, built using lightweight materials such as wood, wire bracing, and fabric-covered wings, similar to the designs seen in early European and American biplanes. Its design followed the general principle of the Wright Flyers and other early biplanes but included local adaptations based on the materials available in South Africa at the time. The wings were rectangular and had a relatively large wingspan to provide sufficient lift. The fuselage was an open frame structure with a forward pilot seat, and the control system used a combination of wires and levers to control the elevator, rudder, and wing warping or ailerons. The engine was a critical component. Importing a proper aircraft engine to South Africa in 1911 was expensive and complicated. Paterson used a suitable lightweight engine that produced enough horsepower to achieve flight, and this choice of engine made the biplane one of the most advanced aircraft in the country at that time. The construction process itself was slow and meticulous, with Paterson and his team handcrafting most parts and relying on local craftsmen to produce wooden spars, ribs, and propeller components. Each detail was carefully tested, as there were no local aviation experts to consult. This made the Paterson No. 2 not just a machine but a symbol of ingenuity and self-reliance. Once construction was completed, Paterson transported the biplane to an open field suitable for flight tests. The early flights were experimental and risky, as aviation safety standards did not yet exist. Reports suggest that the Paterson No. 2 biplane did achieve successful takeoffs, short hops, and controlled landings, making it one of the first powered aircraft in South African skies. The flights were a spectacle, attracting local spectators who were amazed to see a machine fly under its own power. However, these tests were not without challenges. Mechanical failures, weather conditions, and the rough terrain of early airfields all posed risks. Paterson had to constantly repair and adjust the aircraft after each flight to improve its performance. Despite these difficulties, the Paterson No. 2 biplane proved that powered flight was possible in South Africa and encouraged others to experiment with aircraft construction. It inspired a wave of aviation enthusiasm across the country, leading to the formation of flying clubs and early aeronautical societies. Paterson's efforts also demonstrated to the South African public and government that aviation could have practical applications for mail transport, military observation, and communication across the vast landscape of the country. The Paterson No. 2 biplane holds a special place in the history of South African aviation because it marked the transition from passive observation of aviation developments overseas to active participation in aircraft design and flight testing. While it may not have been as famous as the Wright Flyer or Blériot 11, its importance lies in the fact that it was locally built and flown at a time when very few countries outside Europe and America had any aviation activity at all. Percy Paterson became a recognized figure in South African aeronautical history, and his work inspired other early pioneers who would go on to establish flying schools and military aviation units during World War I. The biplane itself is remembered as a pioneering machine that sparked South Africa's aviation culture and contributed to the eventual creation of South African Airways and the country's participation in global aviation. Today, historians and aviation enthusiasts study the Paterson No. 2 biplane to understand the courage and technical skill required to build such an aircraft with limited resources. Its story reminds us that aviation progress was not limited to Europe and North America but was a truly global movement powered by dreamers and innovators like Percy Paterson. The Paterson No. 2 biplane was more than just a flying machine, it became a classroom for South African engineers and mechanics. In an era when most technical knowledge about aviation was concentrated in Europe and America, Paterson's aircraft acted as a practical demonstration of aerodynamics, propulsion, and structural design. Local blacksmiths, carpenters, and mechanics who assisted in its construction learned the fundamentals of aircraft building, from precise wood shaping for wing spars to balancing propellers for stable thrust. These skills were later applied in motor vehicle repair shops, railway workshops, and other mechanical industries across South Africa. Several young engineering students who witnessed Paterson's flights were inspired to study mechanical and aeronautical engineering abroad, later returning to the country to form the backbone of South Africa's aviation industry. The Paterson No. 2 biplane can therefore be credited with not only flying but also sparking the nation's curiosity in science and technology, laying the groundwork for future industrial growth. It is important to place the Paterson No. 2 biplane in its global historical context. During the same period, the Wright brothers in the United States had already flown their flyer, and pioneers in Europe were pushing aviation boundaries with aircraft like the Blériot 11 and Voisin biplanes. However, South Africa's achievement was unique because it occurred far from the industrial hubs of Europe and North America. Shipping engines, propellers, and even proper aviation fabric to the southern hemisphere was slow and expensive, meaning Paterson's project was built under extreme resource limitations. This makes his success even more remarkable. It was a locally driven effort, not just a copy of overseas designs. While the Paterson No. 2 might not have flown as far or as high as the most advanced European planes, it symbolized South Africa's determination to not be left behind in the race to conquer the skies. In many ways, this biplane was a declaration that South Africa was capable of producing homegrown innovation despite its geographical isolation. Today, the Paterson No. 2 biplane is remembered as a priceless piece of heritage. Aviation museums, historians, and South African aviation clubs keep its story alive through exhibitions, lectures, and model replicas. Some researchers have even attempted to reconstruct the biplane using historical blueprints and photographs to demonstrate its design to a new generation of engineers and aviation enthusiasts. Schoolchildren learn about Percy Paterson as one of the country's early inventors, and the biplane often features in books about South African technology and history. Commemorative events sometimes honor Paterson's work, with displays of vintage aircraft and speeches celebrating the courage of early aviators. In the modern era, where South African Airways and private airlines connect the nation to the world, the humble Paterson No. 2 serves as a reminder of how far aviation in the country has come. It is a story of perseverance, passion, and pioneering spirit, values that continue to inspire innovators in every field. After the Paterson No. 2 biplane project, Percy Paterson remained deeply involved in mechanical and aviation-related work. His pioneering spirit pushed him to experiment with improved designs and engines, though not all of them were successfully flown. Paterson became a mentor figure for younger aviation enthusiasts, often sharing his experiences and warning them about the risks of early flight. He was respected as a visionary who had dared to build and fly an aircraft when few believed it possible in South Africa. While much of his later work did not achieve the same historical fame as his No. 2 biplane, his name became synonymous with courage, innovation, and national pride. Percy Paterson also contributed indirectly to the development of South African military aviation. When World War I broke out, many of the country's earliest pilots and engineers were inspired by pioneers like Paterson and went on to serve in the Royal Flying Corps and later the South African Air Force. His influence was therefore felt long after his personal flying experiments ended. The story of the Paterson No. 2 biplane is not just a technological achievement, it is also a cultural milestone. For many South Africans in the 1910s, seeing a flying machine in the sky for the first time was almost magical. It changed the way people thought about distance, speed, and the future. Rural communities that witnessed early flights spoke about them for years, passing down the story to younger generations. The biplane became a symbol of progress and possibility, proof that even a country far from Europe could be part of a global movement of invention and discovery. In modern times, the Paterson No. 2 is often used as an example in South African schools to show that innovation can come from anywhere, not just big cities or rich nations. It has inspired artists, writers, and filmmakers to create works that celebrate the courage of early